All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we were talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I am joined by LeeAnn Lowman, the co-host of House of Yinzer Podcast. How are you doing?
Awesome. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Before we get started, it's always interesting. I see this on Twitter and I see this on social media. Yinzer, tell us a little bit about what that means as a Steeler fan.
So Yinzer is like the Pittsburgh version of y'all or yous in Philadelphia and those areas. So it's our version of that. So we kind of use it for all those situations where Southerners might say y'all, we say yins.
Love it. Love it. And now you've had the podcast with your co-host. How long have you been doing that?
Allison and I just dropped our 4th episode. So the podcast is really new. Allison and I met on another podcast and we still do that one together, but we really found that we just work so well together. We have such good chemistry together. So we had talked and decided we would try to put something together of our own. We have a friend of ours, Blake, who does our production, does a great job for us. And it's been really fun and exciting. So we just dropped our 4th episode today. We interviewed NFL insider Matt Lombardo and dropped that interview today. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah, we're having a good time with it.
Definitely going to have to watch that one. And I'm always interested to kind of find out more about, other teams and all that. And actually, that's why, started doing podcasting because, the connections are great. And for me, I actually started wanting to learn more about fantasy football. And, when I look at teams and players, the best sources to go for are the ones that are doing local podcasts.
Yeah, it's true. The fans are remarkable, and it's true of every fan base. You know what I mean? I have a special affinity for Steelers fans, but I spend a lot of time doing sports related stuff. And one of the things Allison and I have talked about is bringing in those other fan bases. So we've been looking for those other podcasters, those other reporters that support those teams, and looking to fill it, the week before our show with somebody who is a fan or a sports writer for that team each week, to try to bring that local perspective to what we're talking about. Because it's not all, we love the Steelers and it's great for us to talk about that, but it's, the other teams have fans too. And we want to also bring in that perspective.
Well, yeah. And when you're facing other teams, it's also helpful to kind of hear about what are some of their strengths and what you think maybe the Steelers could do best against as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I wanted to get into, one thing, and it's, maybe a little bit of a melancholy, time, the Steelers here with legendary Steelers quarterback Mitch Trubisky, being relegated to number 2. So in one word, give me what your thoughts on the Mitch Trubisky era in Pittsburgh was.
Optimistic. I have to be the most optimistic Steelers fan in the world. So I was really excited about Trubisky signing. I felt like it was a good use of money. You know what I mean? We didn't sign some outrageous, half washed up quarterback for $245 million or something who's terrible. So I felt like we did the best we could in the situation we were in. And what looks to be somewhat of a transitional year for us is Ben retired last year. And Mitch knowing full well that Kenny is our future unless something goes horribly wrong. So I was really optimistic about it. I hoped it would buy Kenny Pickett some time to develop in the league and learn the ropes and be able to get us enough wins to kind of get through, maybe at least to the bye. And that just didn't happen. But I think he's a great backup. I think if he stays at our number 2, that's not a bad place to have him.
Yeah, as a Bears fan, I had a chance to, see him at the 2019 training camp.
Yeah.
And just a great guy. He stayed after late, signing autographs and everything. And but he just didn't seem to have it as a starting quarterback in the NFL long term. And that's, that happens. He still, can have a great career as a backup. And when you obviously you signed him, and I'm sure there was a little kind of confusion within the fan base, but then were you then surprised when you drafted Kenny Pickett?
I wasn't surprised. I think some fans were, and there was a lot of that were like, why do we even bother signing Mitch, and why would we do that, and why would we draft Kenny and not just wait till next season with such a good crop of quarterbacks coming out in the 2023 draft? You know what I mean? Thinking that maybe you've got some other options coming ahead. Why would we even draft Kenny Pickett when we've got those choices? But to me, there's just some players that just feel like the perfect fit for your team. And I don't know what that spidey sense is that the Rooneys have or Tomlin has, where they find these guys that just fit so well in our organization. And I just think Kenny Pickett is one of them. Maybe it's the connection with Pitt. Maybe it's just who he is as a player, that he works so hard. But I wasn't surprised when he was there still. I had predicted all along we would look at drafting him. I was concerned it was a little too soon in the first round, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, a quarterback is the most important position in the NFL. It just,
it is.
And so with that, what are your expectations for him, this year, and what would be considered a success for him?
Yeah, I think my expectations after, and of course you have this like teeny tiny sample size for this half game that he played that we lost last week. And so it doesn't really feel like fair to project all of these expectations onto him for 30 minutes of game time, or not even 30 minutes of game time. But I think that the expectations for most fans have probably changed a little bit. I think, what we hoped that he would be able to come out and learn and provide a good transitional year, if he played this year, and then be able to perform well enough. But I think what we saw was somebody come in who looked almost like a veteran quarterback. He was very poised. He was completely unflustered, got up at one point and was talking smack to the lineman that had tackled him. I mean, he just has it. He just has that kind of it factor. And I made a joke yesterday about that word spark, because that kept coming up in like every press conference, every player, everybody was saying, he brought this spark to the offense, and you really just felt it. You felt it as a Steelers fan watching the game, the players talked about feeling this difference. And so for me, I think that the best expectation for him is to be able to be that starting quarterback and take those first team reps to learn his position, to work with Matt Canada, to evolve our offense into one that has the quarterback run a little bit more, and to be able to prep himself to really perform at a high level next year. We have all the weapons. I know people don't like that idea of a rebuilding year and it makes people angry, but you got to be honest about what it is. If that's what this is, then let's just rebuild well.
Yeah, I mean, in the background, it talks about the standard, and the Steelers have just been, an amazing franchise over the years. And, even recently with Mike Tomlin, exemplary coach and all that. And is because of that expectation, is that hard for Steelers to kind of accept that transition year?
It is. It really is. I've lived a lot of places, not always in Pittsburgh, like a lot of fans, and lived for many years in Washington, D.C., where they change coaches and quarterbacks and things, very quickly. They have very weak ownership, in my opinion, and it creates a struggle for that fan base. And I watched it there for their fans, and you hear other teams' fans tell you, you're so lucky. You guys don't know how good you have it. We wish we had owners like the Rooneys, or which we wish we had a coach like Mike Tomlin. And I think it's true. I think it's easy when you've only known this your whole life. We have a whole generation of fans that have never seen anybody but Ben Roethlisberger play quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, this is all new to them. And so I think for some of us that have been around a little bit longer, I think that, we're able to recognize how lucky we are to, in my lifetime, only have two coaches, which is pretty amazing.
That is amazing. And I have another comment here from Mike Kuntz, Bills fan. He said, "Can he throw us a Pickett?"
No way. It's not happening. It's not happening. We're getting that interception issue we had last weekend. Well, only two really counted, and we're going to get that taken care of and cleaned up. We hope. Like to see Claypool match up a little bit more on size with some of those defenders.
Yeah, I mean, so you talked about weapons earlier and just brought up Claypool.
Yeah.
Talk about the wide receiver pecking order, because when you look at Deontay Johnson, I mean, he's still the main dog, and then now George Pickens is emerging. What's the pecking order there within the wide receiver core?
I mean, they're still calling Deontay Johnson or wide receiver one, and then you see Claypool coming in, as well. And for some of those downfield passes, but I think that it's going to be a little bit like what it's been in our defense, where you talk about that depth chart not really being the be all end all. Do you know what I mean? And based on whatever package you're putting in is what personnel you're putting in. And I think it's really looking at those players that we've got on offense and figuring out how to use them best. Like, I would love to see Derek Watt get more involved. And we've kind of made a joke out of Derek Watt in Pittsburgh because we're paying him money and what are we doing with him? But the reality is that if you go back and watch on plays where Derek Watt is in blocking, we're far more successful than when we're not. So why aren't we looking at some of those things to get him more involved? Getting the ball to Pickens, you get the ball to that kid. He finds a way to make things happen. He's just been, just been phenomenal when the ball gets in his hands. But I think the fans definitely felt like Mitch Trubisky just wasn't throwing to him, wasn't seeing him, whatever it was. He just wasn't reading the field and getting that he was open all of these times. And you could feel the frustration mounting with the receivers. You got to give Deontay Johnson a lot of credit. The kid has really worked hard to tune out the noise and work on his hands and fix some of those drop issues that he was having 2 seasons ago, and has really turned it around. I mean, he makes some amazing catches that you just can't knock the guy for.
Even Pickens making some amazing catches too. So
absolutely, yeah, both of them. The one that we really need to see, I think, step up is Claypool, and this came up last year from some fans. Not a lot. I think people are very defensive of their players, and they don't want you to say anything bad or critical about anybody. But did Claypool hit kind of a sophomore slump last season? And let's see what he does in his 3rd year. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens as things kind of evolve with a new quarterback, if he gets more involved and we're able to use his size a little bit more effectively than we have in the first 4 games.
Do you see Claypool getting traded at all?
So somebody's got to get traded, right? You're not going to have 7 wide receivers on the team. We got Calvin Austin coming back off of IR. Mike Tomlin just announced that. Seven receivers on a 53-man roster just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So somebody's got to go. I think the one thing that saves Claypool a little bit is Gunner and his drop balls. I mean, Tomlin flat out said this is a pattern. 2 balls in 4 games is not a one-off. This is a pattern, and it's concerning. He's already replaced him on returns with Sims. So you imagine that they'll switch spots, on the roster, and Sims will come in, and we'll see. So maybe, that might be the thing that saves Claypool from potentially getting cut if Calvin Austin comes back and performs like people expect him to.
Yeah, I mean, so that's what I heard floated out, that the Bears might be interested in.
I heard that.
The Bears,
and even the Bills.
Even the Bills, yeah. I can see that as well. Quite frankly, I'm not sure if I like Claypool for the Bears, just where they're at. There's so many pieces away, and then I don't even know about his maturity. I mean, he had some of the issues last year, and if you're wanting a top end wide receiver, you want someone who's going to be good culture wise as well. Yeah.
And I think that some of that stuff, the maturity pieces get blown out of proportion. I try to think back to the things I did at 23 and 24, and they probably pale in comparison. You know what I mean? Like, the stuff he does pales in comparison to the stuff most of us do. We're just not on national television. So I don't know that I put as much stock in that stuff. We heard that, a lot about Pickens prior to the pick, that he had an attitude problem and all of these things. And I watch a lot of college football, and my thought on it was that he was defending his team. So I thought he was doing something good, and I didn't take it as a negative. He wasn't out on the streets like creating drama and issues like people sometimes do. But with Claypool, I think what's really hurting him is the consistency issue. I think a lot of teams will take somebody who's got bad behaviors. If you're producing, they're willing to overlook that. I mean, there's a million examples, but he's not productive enough to show that he's worth that kind of effort or money or taking the risk.
When you watched Kenny Pickett in training camp, did he establish kind of more of a rapport with George Pickens because they're both rookies, or is there anything kind of to look at as he becomes the full-time starter now?
I felt like, there's a lot of talk that's been going around about how Kenny Pickett didn't get like the opportunities with the first team that Mitch Trubisky got. I don't know how much stock I put in that. From what I saw, it looked like everybody was getting chances all over the place, and they were legitimately trying to develop a three-way quarterback race between all 3 of the quarterbacks to see, who fared the best, to really say like this was the best man for the job. And I saw him, I thought, have really good chemistry with Claypool and with Pickens. And so I really expected that, he would come out and perform well with both of them. I think, it seems like quarterbacks always have their kind of favorite receiver, like whoever their favorite target is. And I think it'll be interesting to see who emerges as that person. You also don't want to forget Pat Freiermuth and all of this and just how exceptional he is as a tight end.
Well, yeah, you brought up him, and when I think of Freiermuth, I actually spent some time in Michigan, and there's this old German town called Frankenmuth, and every time and they've actually got this Christmas store and everything. But anyway, every time I hear Freiermuth, I think of that, But he has really kind of emerged as one of the better tight ends in the NFL.
And bizarrely enough, got like Chad Johnson's stamp of approval. I saw that on Twitter. I was blown away. I couldn't believe he said anything nice about any Steeler. So that was kind of amazing, handing him the keys or whatever symbolic thing he said. It was cute. He really has. The kid is exceptional. There's all kinds of statistics that show how much better the Steelers perform when Freiermuth gets involved in games. And we've seen it. His best game, probably arguably in his career, was our first game against Cincinnati with that bizarre win. But there he was involved in catching, making catches, long catches over 20 yards, some of them, and making a difference, especially late in that game when we really needed to. Yeah, he makes a big difference. He's hard to stop.
Yeah, and what makes him so good? I mean, obviously he's a good blocker as well.
He's a good blocker as well. He also just has great hands, and he just seems to sync up to be able to get away from those defenders and create enough space to be able to catch the ball. He's intuitive. It's like he knows where to be. It's more than just running his route properly or running the play properly. He's just intuitive. He's for such a young kid, it's like he's done this. Even his rookie season, it felt like he'd done this before. He's really, really exceptional.
Well, yeah, in today's NFL, the tight end is so important, and everyone kind of looking for that next great tight end. And as a Bears fan, we were hoping that Kmet would be that answer, but he's just not able to get open. So if Freiermuth is able to get open, and quite frankly, to be honest, actually I have Freiermuth on most of my fantasy teams because I knew he would be reliable, and obviously you've proven that.
He is, and he doesn't make a lot of mistakes, a lot of stupid mistakes, and I think sometimes that's something that pops up from time to time with tight ends. And of course, Steeler fans are always looking for the next Heath Miller. We have been ever since he retired, and so it's really nice to finally have somebody in Pittsburgh. I'm not putting him at Heath Miller level yet, but certainly on the way there, and I think he provides a lot of stability for that offense.
Well, speaking of a player that's really broken out and expected to do so, Najee Harris, what makes him so good, and what are kind of some expectations for him the rest of the way?
Najee is just an exceptional athlete. The kid is just amazing. We have a few players on the team that I feel like always go like above and beyond with their work ethic to really just put in all the extra work you need to be like top tier or elite, and Najee is one of them. I should give the disclaimer that I'm a huge Alabama football fan, so I was really excited for this pick. But beyond even that, he has just come out and shown that why he was so special at Alabama. He has an ability to drag some defenders behind him, pick up a few extra yards. I think we saw some struggles the beginning of this season, and I was curious to see how he would start to work those out. He just wasn't able to break free and wasn't picking up the yardage that he was picking up last year. And I think some of that was him maybe not trusting the offensive line to do their job for him. And he was kind of like dropping back, dancing around a little bit, trying to break over to the side rather than just plant his foot and head up the middle and kind of pick up those north-south yards. And we've seen him, obviously, that he's either working that on himself or he's being coached on that's changing. And these past two games have been vastly improved with the yardage that he's been picking up and just with his running technique in general, just taking those opportunities where he can get them. He's a smart football player, and he's working on his blocking skills. That's another thing we really need to see from our running backs. We've seen that from Jaylen Warren as well. He's been blocking really well, and so now we've got to get Najee up there too, to where he's blocking as well as Warren is.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the offensive line. I mean, the Steelers have had issues. I mean, that's No secret. And so, what are you seeing from the offensive line so far this year that maybe could even help Najee going forward?
I think the offensive line. I came into this year like fully prepared to scream and yell that it was the same terrible line that we've had, because really just weren't so many differences that you felt like it was making this huge impact. But really, the difference at center has made a big impact, much more. I mean, no knock against Kendrick Green. I think the kid did what the kid could when he was put into a position where he probably shouldn't have been playing to begin with. I think he did the best he could, but it just wasn't his spot. And I think that with bringing Mason Colon at center has really made a big difference. It's not perfect, but you see that offensive line improving every single week. We see them getting a little bit better. And I've been frankly kind of pleased with it, more so than I expected to be.
How has James Daniels done? Obviously, he's a Bears fan. I kind of know him as well. And how has he kind of done transition with the Steelers?
I think he's doing well. I think he's making a difference. He is I was surprised to see that Chuck Okorafor has actually been like our top graded offensive lineman this season, because he's the one that I was like screaming at all of last season for stupid mistakes. And we are still having some of those penalties. The penalties are killing us a little bit with Dan Moore. And so there's still things to work on, but I think he's fit in pretty seamlessly as a lineman there, and fitting in with the group, and made a really positive influence in shoring up his side of the line.
When we look at the other side of the ball and making a positive impact, what are some key players? And we'll go ahead and get to TJ Watt's return in a bit, but what are some key players kind of now and going forward for the rest of the season that you're seeing?
For the defense, definitely Alex Highsmith. I did a piece on Alex this morning. I think he has made such an incredible progression for a player that wasn't expected to be as good as he is. I mean, here he is sitting a half sack back as the sack leader for the NFL right now, and behind Bosa, which is incredible. I think when we heard Watt was hurt, everybody expected, completely the defense production to shut down. And there's been issues. There have definitely been issues, but you're seeing some of those players step up to the occasion. Miles Jack is one of them. Alex Highsmith is one. I think you're really seeing some of those guys fill in those gaps. Unfortunately, our defense is also aging in some areas too. I love Cam Hayward and Alualu, but those guys are not as young as they used to be. I don't think Alualu's ever come back totally from the injury he had last season. Now he's not starting. And you're seeing Cam, who's battling some injuries as well, still playing. He's such a consummate professional. But it just allows our defense to be picked apart more easily. And on top of all the dings and injuries you had like during the game last week that left people questionable for their return anyways. On top of that, just standard stuff.
Yeah, it looks like, looking at right on ESPN, like the whole secondary is questionable, right?
The whole secondary. Yeah, it's insanity. I mean, just saw them drop one after the other in the Jets game last week, and that's really scary.
Well, especially this week going against Josh Allen, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was questionable at best to begin with how well we'd be able to contain Josh Allen if we had everybody, barring TJ Watt, had everybody healthy. But now we've got a lot of people who are going to be playing dinged and beat up. The Bills know that too. The defense already struggles anyways to contain that passing game. It's just not their strong suit this year. And so, it's easy. I mean, they just, to pick us apart.
What about
Josh
that pass?
Allen is dangerous.
Absolutely. And what about that pass rush? I mean, it looks like I didn't even realize that Larry Ogunjobi did sign with the Steelers. Obviously, he was going to sign with the Bears, and that all fell through. How has he been, and how has the pass rush been?
The pass rush, I think, is just – it shows sparks of brilliance. You see these flashes of brilliance at times. It looks really good, and then, it falls apart. And Tomlin has blamed a lot of this on defensive fatigue, and I think that's a real phenomenon. I've been asking everybody I talk to about it, like, how much do you put stock in that? There's been a lot of articles that have come out about how it's BS. The defense just isn't that good, and it just is what it is. Stop blaming it on defensive fatigue. They're just not that good without TJ Watt. And I think there's some validity to that. I think we have some really good players who just play in not a very good system right now, and that's unfortunate. So I think it leads to these, these things we see like Highsmith sacks and some of the brilliant rushes and hurry ups we see from some of the other players, but it's not enough to sustain a whole game or to bring back the Steelers defense of old. They're still trying to run that old system, but with old players, it's just not working.
Well, speaking of kind of bringing back and TJ Watt, I actually this is my first year doing an IDP fantasy football league, and TJ Watt was my first player chosen, and so it was a bummer when he got hurt. Obviously, it's nice that he's going to be coming back. And what is the timetable on that? And will they kind of nurse him along a little bit? If the team's not winning, or how will they treat that?
The thing about the Steelers is I tend to think that they try to do what's truly in the best interest of the player. I don't think that's true for every organization, unfortunately, college and pros. Mm-hmm. So I do think that whether we're winning or losing, I think that Tomlin and the team will try to do what is in the best interest of TJ Watt, because we can't afford to lose this guy forever. And that's, that's the kind of thing that happens when you don't treat an injury properly. And this is a tricky injury. Do you know what I mean? But I will say that he's like some kind of freak of nature. The Watt brothers take such good care of their body. His brother had the very same injury and recovered way faster than he was supposed to recover. So when I saw today, they're looking at like testing the waters on a week for him to possibly return. I think that's great news, and we all got really excited, but I think we should be cautiously optimistic about whether he's really ready in a week. That's very fast. Or if, we are even able to play him, have as many downs as he even did before. Do you know what I mean? If he's still kind of nursing that injury back to health, you just don't want to see him re-injured.
Well, yeah, as a fan, it's hard. And I know this is a Bears fan. You want to think long term, but when you get in a game and you're cheering and everything, you want the team to win, yes, but you want to think long term as well, especially with this being a transitional year. I mean, that's I'm sure that a lot of Steelers fans that's kind of a dirty word, but you want him to be healthy long term.
Exactly. And I said this to somebody earlier that, this whole concept that we can't talk about transitional years or rebuilding years is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Because what is the alternative? We're one of those, one of those teams that never do anything. Do you know what I mean? Every team that's really good right now has gone through some sort of a rebuilding year, including the Bills. And so, this is what you have to do. You have to draft smart. You have to run your free agency smart. You have to manage and mitigate injuries and the players that you keep. And I would never push for like tanking for the draft. That would never, I'm too competitive for that. But I do think all of those, other things come into play where you just really have to think about the long-term success of the team. If it's not looking like it's going to be this year, then you're already looking a little bit towards next year. Of course, you want to win every game, but not at the expense of throwing away a whole season.
Yeah, and when you look at sustained success, it starts with ownership, right? But Tomlin is just been amazing, and this, quite frankly, could be I don't know his first losing season this year if it continues to go.
Could be.
But when you look at him as a coach and his coaching staff, how are you and the Steeler fans? Are you still 100% on board trusting him?
I think that there's a definite divide among Steeler fans. I would imagine it's probably like this in almost every team where there's a group of fans who dislike the coach. If I had to guess, I think the majority of fans like Tomlin and trust Tomlin and put faith in him. But there's definitely some very vocal fans who think that we need to move on from him. I think where Tomlin trips people up a little bit is he just doesn't give anything away. I mean, the man is amazing. I don't know how he does it. I watch his press conferences every week. He's so quick. He never gives anything away. He doesn't even let anything slip out by mistake. And he always has this quick answer to come back when the reporters ask him. He throws the question back at them. She said this week, the lady said, so we're TJ Watt is out with this injury and his timetable is uncertain. What do you think about when he'll return? And he goes, TJ Watt's out with an injury and his timetable's uncertain. What was the question? You know what I mean? Just like he never gives anything away, and he's like that with everything. So I think that frustrates people who feel like they should be let into like the insider secrets of the organization. And I'm not one of those people.
Well, that,
I like them. Yeah.
Right. And so, that happened with Matt Nagy here in Chicago. And the difference, though, was, Tomlin has proven it. Tomlin has won. And
this is true.
When you have a winning background, winning pedigree, it's easy to kind of look at some of those things and be like, okay, we trust. Like Bill Belichick, he gets that all the time. It's kind of the joke. On to Cincinnati. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that the really great coaches in the NFL have that in common. And I frankly think Tomlin is one of them. I've never been one to shy away from tough topics. It's just not who I am as a person. And so when we hired Tomlin many years ago, I do think that there is a group of people in Pittsburgh that were upset that we were hiring a black head coach. I think they felt like we were only hiring him because of the Rooney Rule. We felt obligated to do it. I think they didn't feel like he was the best candidate for the job, or maybe they just didn't want him because he was black. I don't know. But I think those things happen. We had this happen with Cordell Stewart, who you brought up earlier as a quarterback, where horrible things were said about Cordell. And so I think, there's this very old school part of Pennsylvania that doesn't always do the nicest things. And I think that negative feeling is kind of hung around. I'm not by any means saying that every fan who doesn't like Tomlin doesn't like him because he's black, but I think that there's that undercurrent of like, we don't like him. And I think it makes it easy for other people to jump on board. I think Tomlin has proven himself. I think when you look at a team that's got, has never had a losing record under a coach, I don't really know how you complain. Nobody's going to make the playoffs every year. Nobody's going to win the Super Bowl every single year. That's not ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I think people forget that the other teams all want to win it too and are all doing the best they can do. And so, that's what makes football so exciting. Except for the rare exception, like when you get like a Tom Brady Belichick combination, you're just not going to have those long streaks of success like that. Just don't exist.
Well, yeah. We talked about Trubisky earlier, and I was, as a Bears fan, hoping that he would have some success.
Yeah.
And if it was anywhere, it was going to be with Tomlin. Just that stability. So. And when you look at the quarterback position, you need to have stability. And I think that will, definitely be a benefit to Kenny Pickett having that stability. And with the Bears, they don't necessarily have that yet. Hopefully they continue to develop that, for Justin Fields, but that's going to be so important. And just to have that Tomlin, that he seems to be like a player's coach, right?
He is, very much he is. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a player's coach. And I do think that stability breeds trust. You see it in organizations where they take these rookie quarterbacks in, they don't do well, then they bench them and they bring in somebody else, and then they don't do well. And this constant turnover process, and it's got to be really a knock at your ego. I can only imagine that, you make it to the NFL, which is like so elite, and then you're getting benched on national television in front of everybody. And it's just got to be such a crushing blow. And so I've always had so much respect for how the Steelers do kind of like stand by their man, not to the point of failure, but, they aren't knocking, Mitch out. He's still captain of the team. And Tomlin talked about the leadership that he still brings and the professionalism. I think he's handled this situation really well. I wanted him to find success in Pittsburgh. I really hoped he would. I felt like he didn't always get a fair shake. And so I hoped that this would be his opportunity to show it. But if it's not, and he's meant to be a backup quarterback, I hope it's in Pittsburgh.
And if Kenny Pickett struggles at all this year, and there are a lot more losses, do you think Mitch will get more of a shot, or do you think they're just gonna continue to ride with Kenny Pickett?
I think they'll continue to ride with Kenny Pickett. I was frankly kind of shocked that we even wound up putting him in as early as we did. It's just not typical Steeler behavior. So I was really kind of surprised, because Tomlin is definitely somebody who does not really listen to what the fans are shouting. He tunes that out and does what he thinks is best for the team. And he was very adamant prior to the game that we were going with Mitch and that Kenny wasn't coming in. And so I don't think, at least I didn't feel like there was really any hope that he'd be coming in. But I think now that he is, I think that we've all known that he is set to be the future of our team. And I think that they'll do whatever they can to support him and develop this plan for the future. So if this is a transitional year with that happening, then that's what this is. But I don't think that he'll get benched unless something horrible happens.
Well, speaking of this year, hopefully it's not a horrible year, but what are your hopes as a Steeler fan from a win-loss record?
Yeah, I have to tell you, I gave like the worst prediction at the end of last season. I had us going, I'm always optimistic. So I had us like some outlandish record that obviously I haven't even been close to in 4 games. My hope for this season is that we figure it out. We get it together. Do you know what I mean? Whatever that is, I would like to see us win some of these games. I think if we can see Pickett come out playing like he played the second half of the game against the Jets, I think we have a chance at some of these games. I think some of these games we didn't have a chance at anyhow. You know, nobody predicts that we're going to win the Bills game anyways, but maybe some of these other games we've got some shots at, and I would like to see us at least be competitive and have something to build upon and be able to work towards for next season, and to know where our weak areas are so we know what we need to shore up in the draft or in free agency next year, and take a seriously look at some of those, you know, with our defense, still with the offensive line a little bit.
That's the best really way to look at, you know, it's easy as a fan to just kind of, you know, say, well, we're going to win every game. But you look at it, I mean, it's a tough schedule, especially the next 4 weeks.
We have the hardest schedule according to PFF, and strength of schedule is ours is the toughest.
But that's kind of, you know, especially with a young quarterback, even if he takes his lumps, I mean, that's what you want him against some of the great teams, and they can't continue to learn. And yes, it's hard as a fan, but you just being honest, you know, taking a step back, that's okay when you're continuing to build that winning tradition. And when you have the wide receivers that the Steelers have, I think Pickett is in a good place to succeed.
Yeah, I do too. I really do too. And I think that this is the best way to learn. Like, what better way is there to learn than to just get out there and do it? I think he's a smart kid. I think he's got a good head on his shoulders. He's not as young as some of the other rookie quarterbacks, for the little bit of difference I think that makes. And I think he's got a really great support system in Pittsburgh with his teammates who really want to see him be successful and are excited that he's out there starting. So I think he's got an opportunity here. And I think, you know, if this is something that he takes this year, like you said, takes his lumps a little bit and learns from this and grows and develops, and he's the quarterback of our future, I'm all for it.
So
I'm all for it, 100%.
Has Kenny Pickett landed any endorsement deals with glove companies, anything like that yet?
I don't know. I should have to look that up. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody's hit him up, but I doubt he'll want to endorse any gloves given the connotation there.
That would be hilarious. I would love that. That would be even better than the Baker Mayfield ads. I would have to say that.
Right. Yeah, that would be great.
Well, speaking of your AFC North rivals, what are go ahead and rank the teams in the division and tell us what you think.
Yeah, this is kind of a funny question. I asked Steeler fans of this today in preparation for the show. Like, who are the Steelers? Who do you feel is the Steelers' biggest rival? And overwhelming, the answer was what I thought it would be, which is the Ravens. And I was not surprised by that. For one thing, the Ravens are the Browns. So for people that know football history, we get like 2 hits in 1 by going hard against the Ravens. But the Browns really, until recent years, haven't been all that relevant. But somebody brought up a really good point. They said, "Do you mean on the field or off the field?" And I was like, wait a minute, that's a good point, because on the field, it's definitely the Ravens. But if it's off the field, it's definitely the Browns. Nobody talks smack like the Browns fans do. It doesn't matter if how bad they're losing, how terrible their season's going. No one rides into Steeler country and talks smack like the Browns fans do. The Ravens fans have this great, like, kind of respectful rivalry chat with Steelers fans, but the Browns fans are, angry. Yeah, so, it's a whole different.
Yeah, well, so as an outsider, this kind of surprises me. Watching all of the battles with the Bengals. I mean, I'm surprised that you wouldn't even bring the Bengals up.
Yeah, the Bengals are definitely the last team, and I don't know why that is. When we go to play the Bengals, sure, it comes up like right away, like, oh, we hate Cincinnati. But when you talk about big rivalries, you think about some of those really close games with the Ravens. And I mean, they're just, for Steeler fans, they're like gut check emotional. And I know Ravens fans, I have good friends who are Ravens fans, they feel the same way. You know, those are the games that are always unpredictable, you know, that emotions play a part in, you know, that don't just come down to who has the better team. And, you know, we saw some really great Ravens Steelers defenses clashing against each other. And yeah, I mean, it's just absolutely 100%. Those bring up a whole different set of emotions. And then, of course, I had a lot of older Steeler fans come out and talk about Dallas Cowboys and the Raiders. And so some of those rivalries are fun too. The Raiders are still, Gene Upshaw is a really good family friend of mine. And so for years we would joke about the Steelers-Raiders rivalry and the Immaculate Reception and all of those things. And the Raiders are still a team that the Steelers struggle with, no matter how bad they are. I don't know what it is. Every time we play the Raiders, we struggle with them. We play them this year. It'll be interesting to see.
Well, you know, and I'm not sure how often you really, you know, play the Eagles. I mean, how will that game be? I mean, is there kind of interstate, anything like that?
There definitely is an interstate rivalry. First of all, there's the whole, like, I don't know how much you know about this, like the Sheets versus Wawa argument. So one is sort of the western half of the state versus Wawa, which is the eastern half of the state. So that will always come up during this time. And then just the sense of like, which half of the state is the better half, the eastern half or the western half. And people have their very strong opinions. I've lived in both eastern and western Pennsylvania, and it's a really strong interstate rivalry. Absolutely. So this will be a big deal. And of course the Eagles are fantastic. They're doing really well this season. So it's going to be a tough game. It's not always a tough game.
When you look at within the division, who wins the AFC North this year?
I think it's going to be really tough. I think it's going to, I think it's going to be the Bengals. If I had to guess, I really think it's going to be the Bengals. I think they look like the most complete team. I think what's hard is we just don't know how the Browns are going to do when Deshaun Watson comes back. And I think that leaves like a big question mark. I think they have a really legitimate shot. If he comes back and fits into this organization nicely and plays the way they expect him to play, I think the Browns could pull it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting how the narrative can change, right? You know, last year at this time, if you looked at the Bengals, I mean, no one was, you know, thinking the Bengals other than Dan Orlovsky. So when you look at that, that is, you know, the Browns, they've been for so many years, you know, just thirsting for a winner.
Yeah.
And obviously that's why they kind of, you know, went all out. And, you know, however you agree with Deshaun Watson stuff, they pretty much sold everything to get that quarterback. And so when you look, okay, so they are playing the last game of the season, is the Browns are coming into town.
Yes. Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead and say what you're going to say.
So when you think about that, as a Steeler fan base, how are the Browns going to be received on that game, especially knowing that Deshaun Watson should be playing in that game?
Not well. I can tell you already, not well. The Steeler fans are absolutely beside themselves with frustration because for 18 years we heard about Ben's supposed indiscretions. Do you know what I mean? Even fans who didn't necessarily support Ben or didn't necessarily support that we kept him or thought that he did anything wrong, we've heard about it for 18 years from Browns fans. It's been relentless. It's been aggressive. It's been, no matter what you say, they have something to come back and say about it. They're the only team fan base that constantly brings that up. And so now here they are sitting with somebody with 60 some accusations. Do you know what I mean? And Steelers fans are, you know, tables have turned. I mean, what do you say? And so people are frustrated. I think that I don't know about other fan bases, but Pittsburgh has a very strong female fan base that feels pretty disgusted and frustrated about what's going on in the NFL with this situation and others. It's not just this one, but just the general disregard for what happens for females that are involved in sports teams. And so, yeah, I imagine it's going to be ugly. I expect them to get booed and whatever else they can drum up.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Hopefully a bunch of sacks.
Yeah, and when you look at it, I mean, especially if TJ Watt is back, I mean, that's definitely
a possibility. It's going to be I think it'll be an emotional game. I think it'll be an emotional game on both sides. You know what I mean? I think the Browns always feel like they have something to prove when they come to Pittsburgh. I think the Steelers, no matter how good or bad the Browns are, we always feel like we have something to prove when we play the Browns, and when we play them at home, even more so.
All right, so here's a question then. Out of the division, which team wins the next Super Bowl?
Ooh, Steelers. 100%
really?
Steelers. Yeah, I think so. I think Kenny's our future. I think we've got a really great young receiving core. We've got almost a good problem with too many wide receivers. I think we'll find a way through this year to channel that energy, to pick up the defenders we need and get back up to where we need to be. And I think Kenny Pickett wins us the Super Bowl.
So even though the Bengals are a little bit further along, or maybe even the Ravens are as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I think that the Bengals have a really legitimate shot. They're a great team. I wouldn't knock them. Joe Burrow is a great quarterback. I think they're putting together a really complete team. They should be really proud of what they've built in Cincinnati. That's another example of how people rebuild. I think the Browns have done the same thing. I think the Ravens are a lot like the Steelers, and like they never totally unpack the suitcase, so they don't have to build quite as much as other teams do. I think that they do a really good job in Baltimore of keeping really strong competitive teams. They really have since their inception. They've done a remarkable job in Baltimore with that team. They're always a threat. And then you can't overlook the luck factor that goes into sometimes winning. You know, something bounces off the uprights, or your opponent misses an extra point, and you can't overlook that luck factor that comes into play. It's always a little bit of luck.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. I definitely appreciate you coming on. And where can everyone find you again?
So I'm at Hollywood Lowman on Twitter and on Instagram. And you can give us a follow. Actually, at House of Yinzers is the podcast.
And when are you recording? How often?
We are recording weekly. And I said that wrong. It's at Steeler Yinzers is the podcast. Yeah, we're recording weekly. So we're dropping an episode a week. Allison and I got a little hemmed up last week. We both happen to live in Florida right now, and dealing with Hurricane Ian threw us all off. We were dealing without power and some other issues. Lucky to not sustain serious damage, but it made for a crazy week. So other than that, it's a podcast a week.
Well, looking forward to seeing all of the content that you have and seeing how the Steelers go. And definitely appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Once again, this has been NFL Outdated Cover 2 series on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Go like, subscribe, and obviously follow the Steelers House of Yinzer podcast on Twitter and all social media. Thanks again.